As we work to care for ourselves and appreciate our own worth, we all deserve a touch of elegance or even luxury from time to time. Yet, treating ourselves can often feel like an indulgence we should avoid. And that's why I was delighted to discover Quince, a brand that marries luxury with affordability. Quince just isn't a store, it's a gateway to high-quality essentials accessible to everyone. Quince offers an incredible range of high-quality items that won't break the bank. Imagine slipping into a 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater for just $50, or dressing up in washable silk tops and dresses. They also have organic cotton sweaters and even 14-karat gold jewelry. And the best part is that all items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. How do they do it? Well, Quince partners directly with top factories, eliminating costly middlemen, and passes those savings right back to us. Plus, they only work with factories that uphold safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices using premium materials. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Visit quince.com/bestofyou for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/bestofyou to enjoy free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Alison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another very special bonus episode of the Best of You podcast. I am so thrilled to bring you today's conversation. I first met our guest today when I joined her podcast network. So when you look at the Best of You podcast, you'll see that I am part of the That Sounds Fun network. And it's a group of podcasts where they really support us and help us. And they also help us work with advertising partners, which allows us to bring you this content for free. And Annie's That Sounds Fun network is really the people behind that whole part of this podcasting. So I don't even have to think about it. I would not do well if I had to be the one trying to figure out those ad placements. They do all of that work for us. And I'm really grateful for that. I will say in today's episode, we touch on this. Initially, I thought to myself, is it strange for a podcast all about healing from trauma, healing childhood wounds, taking charge of our mental and emotional health? Does it make sense for this podcast to be on a network called That Sounds Fun? And the truth is, it is my deepest joy to dive into this content, both from my own work and with other mental health experts out there to bring this content to you. So to me, this is the absolute definition of joy and vitality that I think underlies this idea of fun, as Annie and I talk about in today's episode. And I also am so grateful that as I've gotten to know Annie, she really embodies the both and that's why I'm so thrilled to bring you this conversation today, because I think it speaks to something we all need, especially in the midst of life's challenges. We need to be able to hold both joy and hardship, to cultivate lightness even in heavy, hard seasons, and to reclaim, as we've talked about in past episodes, the parts of us that have been buried under the weight of responsibility, fear, or pain. That's part of the work that we are doing here. And that's why I'm thrilled to have Annie on the podcast today. Now, if you know Annie, you know that she is all about fun. That's the name of her podcast. That Sounds Fun. That's the name of our podcast network. She brings this infectious energy wherever she goes, whether she's talking about faith, friendships, or the struggles in her own life. But what I have learned to really respect and love about Annie is that her joy is not shallow or naive. It has been shaped by grief, by loss, by her own pain, and by the hard and deeply formative work she's had to do to hold on to hope. And so that makes me want to listen even more when she talks about the importance of fun and of joy and of play. So in our conversation today, that's exactly what we do. We explore the both and how to navigate heartache and struggles without losing sight of the joy, and how playfulness can actually be a sign of wholeness, of integration, of healing, and how fun is not just a luxury or a side note, but a really important component in healthy relationships and a flourishing life. Annie shares about how for much of her early life, she actually wondered if her love for fun was a weakness, if it was keeping her from being taken seriously or even from growing up in the ways she thought she should. And she shares more about how she learned to integrate that part of her. As a result of all that work, she has some really profound insights about the difference between getting real relief through play and through fun versus escapism when we're trying to run away from things or avoid things. She's had to learn how to work through that the hard way. And then in the last part of our conversation, we go deeper into how Annie created meaning through a profound heartbreak. A couple of years ago, her family experienced the devastating loss of her baby nephew, TJ, and Annie shares with us how she processed that in her own unique way. And it's through writing a children's book. She initially wrote it for her family, but actually discovered that there's a real need for books such as this. The book is called Where Did TJ Go? And today she shares that story with us. Annie F. Downs is a New York Times bestselling author, sought-after speaker, and host of the popular That Sounds Fun podcast. Her books include That Sounds Fun and Chase the Fun, and Annie is also the founder of the That Sounds Fun network, which supports and uplifts other voices in the podcasting world, including yours truly. She's also the founder of the Single Purpose League, which is a community for Christian singles seeking connection and purpose. And she shares a little bit about that on today's episode as well. Most recently, Annie channeled her personal experience of loss into a children's book called Where Did TJ Go? It's written for families who are navigating the grief of losing a child. I'm so thrilled to bring you my conversation with Annie F. Downs. Annie, I'm so thrilled to have you here today. I got to know you actually through your books. I've read most of your books before I even really knew you as a podcast host.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really love about you, I think you have what I'm going to call a spiritual gift of, I call it playfulness.
Yeah.
You call it fun. I think more to the point. I think the Bible calls it joy. Sometimes I think that can feel heavy-handed. But in the work that I do, for my listeners, we talk a lot about IFS, internal family systems. That's my background. That's the core of my work. One of the qualities that Dick Schwartz, the founder of the model, attributes to what he calls the self, what I call the spirit-led self, when we're walking in our true self. One of the primary qualities he calls playfulness. And I love this quality because it gets at this side of life that I think sometimes, especially for those of us who can get heavy, who can get into what's hard, who in some ways have had some of that robbed through painful childhood experiences where we're supposed to hone that playfulness, that sense of wonder. I see that in your work. And so there are times I think of Looking for Lovely and even Remember God and Chase the Fun where I needed your voice to help take me back to what I believe is a quality of the spirit-led self. Tell us a little bit, Annie. I'm curious, was that always a part of you? What were you like in your early 20s? What was that like for you when you were younger? Were you always someone who kind of wanted to find the joy, wanted to find the fun? How did that show up in you as a younger woman?
Yeah, it has always been me. The transformation has been probably in my 20s. I asked more questions like, how did everybody else stop having fun and I don't want to stop having fun? Like, I kind of thought of it as, and I so deeply dislike this phrase because I don't think it's true or real, but I felt more like a late bloomer. I thought everyone else is growing up and I'm not. And because I didn't have a theology around fun and I didn't have a theology around or a psychology around what does it mean if this is just how God made me. And so a lot of it was not that became part of me. It's that was always part of me. And the more work I've done, the more counseling I've done, the more growth I've done, the more I've just embraced that as part of me and let it be part of the mature me versus trying to get it out of me thinking I wasn't mature.
So there are parts of you that felt like, because I think about even Jesus' words, become like little children. And I think about the work so often that I'm doing and some of my colleagues are doing with folks who've lost that sense of play and that sense of wonder as a result of childhood wounding and childhood trauma. We're trying to restore that. It almost sounds like your experience was the opposite. Like, I feel like there's something wrong with me. Why am I wanting to keep this part of me?
And it was my childhood wounding feelings were more around, I'm an Enneagram 7. Our main question is who's going to take care of me, right? So a lot of my entertaining myself, a lot of it was, well, if there's chaos going on around you and it doesn't directly affect you, can you go have fun? Can you just eject out of that and go have fun? And so I was able to entertain myself a lot and be the fun that I needed. And so as I grew up in that, my counselor from Onsite is Jim Kress, who I know you know and love. Yeah. One of the things Jim taught us at Onsite that he has repeated to me multiple times is the tools you needed to survive as a child are not tools you necessarily need anymore. And so what does that mean? If that was a tool I used, every kid has to survive something, being picked on, all sorts of levels of something, right? And so for me, being an entertainer and entertaining myself was a tool that I didn't have to let go. I've been in therapy since 2013. So regularly, like monthly or weekly for 11 years, going on 12 years. And a lot of the work has been, you don't have to let go of that tool. Let's just figure out how to actually use it in a way that actually reflects who you are. And that's been different. That was different in my I didn't get there until my 30s, probably.
I get it. I love that. So there's a way in which we talk a lot about how there was a part of you that was just its only go-to. And sometimes that was healthy and it probably helped you, but it also probably helped others. But you had to learn how to exercise agency. There's a time for it, but there's also a time for other things. I love that you didn't lose it.
Yeah. And so I'm 44 and I've never been married and don't have any kids. And so in my 20s, when people were partnering off and getting married, the other narrative that was in my head was, you must not be mature enough because you still love fun and nobody's marrying you. So you must not be as grown up as everyone else is. And so I felt stunted in a lot of ways in my 20s. And part of it was, now I know, can you imagine if I'd have killed the fun? My entire career is based on that word, right? Like everything God is doing in my life publicly is through the concept of what you said. It is what I am known for. I'm known for my friendships and I'm known for having fun. And I would tell you what the enemy tried to steal, kill, and destroy in my 20s was, hey, this part of you is actually keeping you from being who you want to be. And meanwhile, what God was saying is, no, this is exactly how I made you. And can you mature in it versus believing needs to be removed from you?
100%. Yeah, I relate to that. I relate to that with the achiever part of me. You know, there's these really beautiful good, and they map onto the Enneagram for sure, but beautiful good parts of us that, for me, being single into my late 30s and feeling like that part of me that just loved, for me, fun was being in school. And was that making me wrong? Because maybe it was a little bit different, as opposed to that part of me is a beautiful part of how God made me, but we have to learn how to hold that part in tension with the rest of us. So Annie, tell me so one of the things I love about you and about your writings is you do go to what's hard. You do. And I've so wanted you on the podcast because in the process of talking about hard things, we do need this art. I think it's an art. I think it's a spiritual discipline. I love how you use the word theology of play, of fun. It's so important when we're hurting not to lose that. I have seen that quality be so essential in marriage, in being a good friend to someone, that there's an art, right? You don't want to be that person that shuts down someone when they need to grieve, but you also can strategically use play. When there's annoyance or when someone's done something, there's a way when we are spirit-led, self-led, that it becomes such a tool for harmony and just laughter. It is such an art that I don't want to lose. And I wonder, one of the things I notice about you is I have friends, for example, who I know will make me laugh. And I'm like, oh man, I just need to just do something fun, right? But I might not call them when I'm hurting. And there's that dissonance there. And I wish we could have more of that. How have you, kind of putting you on the spot here as my case study, how have you cultivated the both and?
Well, I'm not sure my friends call me when things are really hard. I'm not sure that's the phone call I get when they're in a deep, emotional, sad place. Now, they're some of my up close best friends. When we talk about everything, I think that's true. But that second tier and beyond, when they think, I have friends, I think, man, when I'm going through something, this is who I'm going to call. I don't think I'm that for a lot of friends. And I'm totally okay with that because genuinely, I don't enjoy it either. I'm not helpful. I didn't sign up to be a counselor for a reason. My college best friend is a therapist. And at the end of our work days, when we're Marco Poloing back and forth, I'm like, you listened to people all day? What a nightmare. I mean, I'm just not built like that at all. And so I am really built for emergencies. I am very good in traumatic situations and in emergencies when you need someone to come in and get things right and get people fed, because my emotions are not my first stop in my train. If my train's going to different stations, my emotions are not the first stop. I am very good when everyone else is very emotional. And so I get that call far more than I get the will you sit in my pain with me call. I got it today. Hey, we're going through a really traumatic thing with our family. I said, okay, I've got dinner. Tell me the restaurant and I'll send you too much food. And so I can do that. And I can do the, hey, thanks for coming over to dinner tonight. Our kids have had a tough week at school, and it is so good that you're the one coming to dinner because our kids laugh so much when you're here. So those are kind of what I get more than the, hey, I'm processing this really hard, painful thing, and you're a second or third tier friend that I want to process that with. I don't get that call unless it's someone I'm discipling. Like there's a handful of women I disciple, and that makes sense because I'm a leader to them, but that is not who I am for my peers. But I'll tell you one thing I do, a practice I do pretty regularly, Alison, is there's a game called Tinsy. Do you know Tinsy?
Mm-mm.
It's so easy. You buy a set of 4 tin dice. So like 10 dice that are orange, green, blue, purple. And it is the easiest game where everyone has a dice of their color and you roll them until they all match. It's like a version of Yahtzee. But you can play around in 2 minutes. And so it's a really easy game to bring with me anywhere.
Love
because
that.
then you sit down and when you're playing a game or when you're out on a walk or if you're doing anything like that, there's just a space for conversation that may not happen if you're just sitting around the table drinking coffee. Now, some of our friends listening really, and some of my real life friends love going to coffee with someone and talking for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah,
I do not. I do
it.
not think long amount of time equals quality amount of time. And so I'd much rather go on a walk with you for 45 minutes and talk. And I'm also like, hey, if we went and saw a movie together, that's quality time to me. And so I'm just built a little bit different than the people who you go to when you are in your saddest moments.
I love that. I love the self-awareness. And I love that we need all different kinds of people. And I love that you're the one that's prepared to show up to bless your friends with the game. I also think I heard you said somewhere, Annie, that sometimes you will, I don't know if you meant this formally or informally, you'll act as a fun coach for people.
Yes. Yeah. Now we don't no one pays me to do it. We don't do it. I just don't have time to do it. But yes, I mean, when we did the That Sounds Fun tour a couple of years ago, one of the segments every night was fun coaching, where we brought someone on stage who had presented a fun problem. Because here's the reality, Alison, is that anybody who's looking for fun is looking for something deeper. Fun is the gateway drug often to what you really need.
Yes.
You really need peace. You really need joy. You really need relief. Because fun can go a couple of different ways. If you're pursuing fun, you can either do it in a way that is redeeming or you can do it in a way that is escapism. And there's redemption and relief, and then there's escape. And those are the two paths. And so what people will ask, we got questions on tour like, I remember one, I think we were in Indy, but I'm not totally sure. And the young woman was like, my dad just died and he was the fun person. How do we do holidays? You know? And so I can pretty quickly think up fun things you can try. Or like I want to be a fun mom, but we don't have the budget for that. So we don't have the budget to go to Disney World once a year. What do we do? And I'm always like, go to 4 Mexican restaurants in your town and taste the guacamole at all of them. It's a $3 to $5 investment every time. Give your kids scorecards and y'all score the guacamole and you've spent $20 that night, but you've given your kids this ridiculous experience and they can't believe they're going to 4 Mexican restaurants in a night. My brain thinks up that pretty quickly. So that's kind of what the fun coaching looks like, though it is not like for hire currently.
It's a gift. I think it's a spiritual gift. I think about times in my life where I've been because there's an art to it too. Like you're saying, I had a friend, I remember I was so down, I was so bummed out, telling this friend of mine who I think has this gift, and all of my friends were getting married. I was consistently kind of finding myself demoted. You know how that happens as everybody? And I'm so glad we can talk about this on the podcast for my listeners, because we've had a few episodes recently. There's some fantastic books coming out on marriage this quarter, and I always think about my listeners who are single or divorced and what that feels like. And I remember being in those shoes, and I just visited my 7th friend, it's like 27 dresses, my 7th wedding, and her apartment was just filled with all of her. And I was just kind of feeling, woe is me. This friend, I'll never forget it, just turned it. And by the end of it, we were laughing hysterically. Every single thing that had been hurting me or causing pain or making me feel bad. And she would turn it into a joke, and we would just start laughing and laughing. And it was therapeutic. It was cathartic. It released all of that. It's a gift. I don't have it. I wish I had that gift, because it has meant so much to me when others have offered that gift to me. I think it's healing.
Yeah,
for
I agree.
people when we can go right in there, because to your point, it's coming out of pain when we need to find that release, and when it's done well. And like you said, not as escapism, but as I see you, I get it, I know what's going on, and I can bring into this just some levity and some lightness. It's really a gift.
It is. I think what I would encourage our friends listening is, if it feels easy, it's probably a gift. Like, if it feels easy to you, it's probably a gift. Because there are some people who are like, the easiest thing to me is to sit and listen to people talk about their problems. That is so easy for me. That isn't a heavy lift 9 out of 10 days. And honestly, if someone at 21 would have told Annie at 21 that this is a gift, I think my 20s and my 30s, I'd have been easier on myself if I would have thought this could be a gift. But I'll tell you the other thing, Dr. Alison, the image I use a lot to separate relief from escapism, especially when we're helping other people, is you don't want to take the whale out of the ocean. You want to bring the whale to the top of the ocean and let them blow out their blowhole. It's not ours to remove people from their pain. It's not ours to take them out. It is ours to figure out a way. Can you come up from the depths and get to the surface and then go back down? So it's an hour, it's 2 hours, it's an evening. So I think this isn't looking for lovely, but I mean, there was a time when I got on a plane and flew away from everybody and didn't tell. And that is taking the whale out of the ocean, right? That was not a relief. That was an escape. And when we do that for ourselves or for other people, we aren't actually helping them heal. A whale can't survive outside of the ocean, but real whales have to come up to the surface. You have to. And so we need to be, for our friends, how can I help them get to the surface and not try to take them out of the ocean? And that is how we can help shape relief versus escapism for each other.
That's so good, Annie. That's the art of it. I can't pluck you out of this and rescue you, but man, I can give you the gift of a few moments to just come up for air. I love that.
And we don't actually want to rescue them. I was just talking to Tyler Staton about this. He has a book coming out about the Holy Spirit, and he has just been through a pretty serious cancer battle. And he said, I don't ever want to do that again. But would I go back and choose this again for what I have gained from God? Yes. Scripture says suffering leads to perseverance, character, hope. We actually don't want, I mean, this is hard when there's kids involved. This is hard when there's people we love involved. We actually don't want them not to suffer. We actually want people to walk through what God has for them so that they get the gifts God has for them. So we can't take them out of the ocean because the ocean's full of the gifts from God, but we can help them. Okay, I know this is the hardest season. I know you've never been through anything like this. Let's go get pedicures and just put our headphones in, our earbuds in, and listen to an audiobook. We don't even have to talk. And just like, can I help you get to the surface for 2 hours? And then you can go back to what you need to go back to. So a cooking class, a pedicure, going to a movie, going on a drive, going on a walk. There are lots of things we can do for ourselves and for each other that help us come to the surface.
In my years of being a therapist, one of the lessons I've learned is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute hour or even from typical weekly counseling sessions. This is why some people can go to couples counseling for months or even years and never really get anywhere or make any progress. This is why I'm such a believer in the intensive counseling process at Restoring the Soul in Colorado. Restoring the Soul was created by Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Michael and his extraordinary team of therapists know that sometimes you just can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience a needed breakthrough. For over 20 years, Restoring the Soul has helped couples and individuals transform their relationships and their lives. So if you're looking to get out of the rut you're in but can't wait months or years, contact Restoring the Soul today at www.restoringthesoul.com and learn how their intensive counseling process can jumpstart your journey or launch you to the place you want to be. And as a special gift just for the Best of You podcast listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/bestofyou to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unresolved Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationship. That's www.restoringthesoul.com/bestofyou.
Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenager's faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
There's an authority with which you talk about this. I can tell when someone is doing that with that intention. They're not afraid of my pain. It's, I see your pain. This is the gift I have to bring you.
That's it. That's exactly
right. And that's
right.
what I hear you saying. There's a self-awareness. Maybe it's not my favorite thing to do. I don't want to be the one to sit and process all your emotions with you for 2 hours, but I can see your pain. I can see it. I get it. I've been there myself. I've been to those places in myself, which gives me an authority. That's what I hear in what you're saying.
And it's the self-awareness of the deeper you go in a conversation does not the best friend make. Right? So I also had to come to terms with, I'm thinking of my friend also named Annie, which is complicated. Annie can get in this with you and she can talk it through with you. Annie Downs can help you have fun. Someone experiencing both Annies, one is not necessarily a better friend than the other. That's a work I had to do to go, well, I want to be a good friend. I want someone to call me their best friend. Do I have to be serious to be someone's best friend? And for some people, you do. But for my closest friends, also, the closer you get in with somebody, the more they experience a 360 of you.
Exactly.
And so my best friends do get, like my coworkers, my best friends, they do get all the sides of me that can sit in pain with you. But I think that's the work I had to do, Alison, of saying to myself, like, you aren't a lower tier friend because of the gifts you offer. You're just a different kind of friend because of the gifts you offer.
How much do you think in the Christian world there was another overlay of second guessing that? That's why I keep wanting to call it a spiritual gift, because I think it's lacking. I think there can be a heaviness sometimes, but I'm curious if that's your experience.
Well, I think the teaching, whether it was caught or taught, especially as a teenager, was more about how not to be rebellious and escape, right? Like, here's what you don't do. I don't know that there was good teaching that I recall that said, here's what redemptive fun can look like, and fun can be mature. But I also don't remember teaching against it. You know, I didn't grow up in a church culture that said you shouldn't laugh or you shouldn't have fun, or if you're laughing, you're doing this wrong. We grew up and had a ton of fun. Our youth group had a ton of fun. And so I don't remember that. I just remember thinking, especially in college, because I was real involved with my college ministry at the University of Georgia, the Wesley Foundation. And I remember thinking, I feel like I'm spiritually maturing. Why do I feel like I'm behind in every other way?
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so that's probably what I thought the most, versus that the church told me not to have fun. I think I thought is everyone else growing up without me? Feels like they might be growing up without me. And they were. I just had different gifts. I mean, I've probably bought my counselor a boat, it has taken work to get here. And to some degree, that work did mature me. Right? Like I wasn't right, but I was right in some ways because I was slower to accept my gifts than some other people.
That's the irony.
That's the irony. Again, I think the term late bloomer is so unkind because who scheduled anything? So I don't use that term as much as I say I probably matured a little slower because there were other people who accepted their gifts quicker.
I love the integration is the word, listening to you, right? And this takes time. We are all complex. But when there's a complexity of parts where there's that fun side of you, there's that business savvy side of you, culture building side of you, spiritual side of you. You have a deeply feeling side of you that I see come out in your writing. I relate to a lot of that. I think when you use that word late bloomer, it's funny because I'm with you. I resonate with you because, there's a therapist part of me, but there's a really lighthearted, playful part of me. How do those go together? There's a driven part of me. How does that work with these other pieces? And listening to you, Annie, and I love that you embody this most of all, but just having this chance to talk to you that I think that when you're able to just own, like you said, I'm good at fun and I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm bringing and I know what I don't bring. There's an inner peace in that spills out and frees other people. And that kind of healing that flows out of you may not look like, being the therapist in the therapy chair, but it's impacting so many people. And I love just hearing that from you and hearing and seeing your eyes light up as you describe that. And it took a while to get there.
Yes. Once you learn what you're really good at and what you're not good at, I'll tell you, it can be polarizing for people. They know whether they like you or not. It's polarizing in dating. It's polarizing in friendship. It's polarizing in co-working, where you're just like, the reason I'm in therapy is I need someone else keeping me between the lines at all times. So I'm not saying this is me, deal with it. What I'm saying is I know my strengths and my weaknesses as I continue to grow as a person. If these don't match your strengths, if this isn't attractive to you in friendship or dating or co-working, go with God. I wish you well because my maturity and my gifts will hopefully keep changing. My gifts don't change.
I love that. There's an inner acceptance that sometimes is recognizing the more I become who I am and the more I embrace it, own it, and put it into the world, some people may not go for it.
If I thought I was perfect and everyone should come in alignment with me, that's a whole other problem. I say a lot, I have perfect attendance to my wins and I have perfect attendance to my sins. So I know exactly who I am and I know my weaknesses. I know that I laid in my bed and scrolled on my phone this morning instead of reading my Bible, right? Like I know me. And so because of that, when I'm like, man, I can still get disappointed and still get my feelings hurt. But I'm like, well, I brought myself and you did not choose myself. I can't change me. I can grow me, but I brought to you the basics and the basics weren't interesting to you. Go with God. And you know what else? And this is true because this is true about you, Dr. Alison, and I'm thinking of some other friends it's true of, is sometimes people walk away because they haven't done the work to know their strengths and weaknesses. And it causes an internal turmoil that has nothing to do with you. And sometimes they walk away because they don't like you. And you may never know why. But there are people to this minute, I go like, oh, I don't think I like you. And a lot of times it's because they're living a truth that I'm unwilling to live. So I wish them well. I wish them well.
Before we shift to the book, I've noticed you're doing more to gather community for single folks, especially single folks in the church. I know that for me, being single in my 30s, in the church in particular, were some of my loneliest years. And I hate to say that, and I don't want that to be true. And I spent a lot of time trying to explain to people what was helpful and what wasn't. I see you doing a lot more publicly. I kind of hate that you have to do it, Annie.
Thanks, me too.
Because there's so much more to you, and I almost don't want to ask you about it. But for those listening, are there places where they can find your work and the good work that you're doing there?
Yeah. I'll tell you briefly why this became a yes for me. I have been unmarried the entire time I've been a public, well, the entire time I've been a person, but the entire entire time I've had a public job, I have not been married. And I made a pretty strong decision early on that I did not want to talk about being single because I didn't want to be the poster child. Very uninterested in being the poster child of this. And a couple of summers ago, we did a dating series on That Sounds Fun called Summer Lovin'. And I got on Instagram and I just said, hey, I want to tell you, if you're single, I want to tell you something. Can I have your email address? I'm not selling anything. I just want to tell you something. And we were hoping for 1,000 email addresses. And by the end of the week, we had 20,000 email addresses, Alison. And so what that said to me was not that other people weren't doing work for singles in the church. There's a lot of good work being done. What it said to me is there's an audience waiting for you to talk about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm still not very interested in that. And then the Lord had this conversation with me, Alison. I'm pausing to be like, do I want to tell the world that? But yes, I think I've said it. But either way, I'll tell you. And sometimes the world also hears it. I said to Lord how much I didn't want to do this. And the Lord said, it's only a season. Now, does that mean I get married? No, it does not. What it means is I could get married, or I could die, or Jesus could come back. And if any of those three things happen, Alison, I lose the influence I have right now over unmarried people. And I lose some degree of it. People will be happy for me, and then they will say, she doesn't understand us anymore. And when the Lord said that out, he knows me. He knows the only thing he's got to do is go, hey, if there's a timeline on this, will you let me squeeze everything out of the window when I've got it? And he just knows that that's like catnip to me.
It's your love language.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, then
Make
let's
it happen.
go. If you're telling me, and it could be 30 more years, Alison, but what the Lord said to me is, this is only a season. Can I have it? And so when he did that, a lot of things changed for me where I went like, well, let's talk about it then. So most of the information is at singlepurposeleague.com, which is the group people can be a part of that is like 2,000 plus singles, mostly females, mostly Christian, who are just trying to figure out not necessarily how to be married, because a handful of them don't care. It's never married, divorced, and widowed. And some people don't want to get married again or get married. They just want community. And then there are a bunch of us who do want to get married and hope. And over, Alison, I'll say to people, listen, I know you don't want to be in here. I know this isn't what you wanted to be in. Me neither. But we're here. So what do we do? How do we actually make this time count? We did a survey about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, to Single Purpose League. And we said, do you feel supported by your church? And 65% of people said no or not really. And then we said, where do you want to meet somebody? And like the top 4 of the top 10 were church or church adjacent. And so then it was like, we got to tell the pastors, because pastors are wishing they could figure out how to help singles. Singles are saying, I don't feel supported, but I'm not going anywhere. So we got to get everybody on the same team. So if you have any pastor friends listening or leaders, we have this resource for pastoring singles. It's free. You just take it. It's at anniefdowns.com/pastoring singles. And we're like, just start some conversations in churches. We've had over 1,000 people download it and just like, have it. We don't care. So that's kind of where all that stuff is. And my promise to God is that as long as I'm not married, and as long as he'll give me influence over this audience, I mean, as long as I have a voice to these people, I'll use it. But I know my voice is more profoundly helpful when I'm one of them. And so I get to do that right now.
Wow. I am just so grateful. I wish you'd been around. I mean, you were through your books.
But I wasn't talking about it.
Yeah. But Annie, I get it. I don't know why it's so fraught. I wish it wasn't, especially for women. I don't know why it's so hard. It adds this whole extra layer of self-doubt. It did to me too. I wish it didn't. I've seen so many clients come through my door where half the time, and I remember saying this to my therapist, like they're just there for the structure and the support in the company. And I'm like, I will be that for you. I want to be that person for you because I get it. I get that marriage does not solve all of life's problems. It does not. And also there's just this layer of alienation that you can feel in our culture. And I just am grateful that you're doing it. And I hope the listener will check out those who are listening. Thank you for just talking about it.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
I do want to, Annie, talk about, there's so many things you're doing in your life. We'll have to have you back. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. But you've also been through this incredible tragedy in the last couple of years. I know it happened a few years ago. I don't think the grief ever fully goes away. Would you kind of, as we pivot here to this children's book that you've written out of a personal tragedy that you've gone through with your family. I think you wrote the book with your sister. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, isn't it funny? Only the Lord would be like, you know what you're going to talk about in 2025, Annie? Being single and your nephew who passed away. Have fun. Come up.
Grief and singleness.
Come up for air when you want to. Don't escape. Just relief. I have had so many conversations, as you can imagine. I've had so many conversations with the Lord in the last 6 months about I'm really good at folding a fitted sheet. Where's the ministry around that? Because would love for that to be it. But I am also really thankful that the life God hands us, he does not waste. And TJ is a part of my family and a part of my life. And I'm glad God keeps finding ways to use his little life. But my sister and her husband were pregnant with TJ in 2022. They knew very early. They have another son named Sam, who's 2 years older. They knew pretty early in their pregnancy that TJ was sick and that he had a life-limiting diagnosis. And so the grief and joy we held in the middle of that was, we know what the doctors are saying and we know what God could do. And so we spent Tatum's pregnancy hopeful that God would change the story from what we were told. And meanwhile, there's a 2-year-old in the story as well, right? There's a 2-year-old who thinks his little brother's coming. There's a 2-year-old who calls his brother TJ. There's a 2-year-old that we all care about. I jokingly say I think he's a little bit of an idol in my life. I love him so much. But as we got closer to the birth of TJ, and as the doctors kept saying, his lungs have not developed, his heart has not developed, you need to be prepared that he will not live. If he lives days, we'll be surprised, probably more like hours. I started calling, I think I may have emailed you, Alison. I started calling therapists, counselors, and other friends I have that have lost children while raising other children. I said, what's the book we read? And there was no answer. There was a recommendation of one that's pretty popular, but it doesn't have a gospel story in it. It's a mainstream story, which it's still helpful. And then there was these blinks of, have you heard of this one? Our family liked it, but that family didn't like it. But then when David Thomas and Sissy Goff, when they didn't have a resource and they are the experts to me for raising kids, I thought, A, there's a problem here. And B, how do I help Sam, my nephew? And so I wrote a book for Sam. I was like, if we can't find it, I'll write it. Again, knowing my skill set, I knew what I couldn't do is I couldn't rescue my family from the pain. I'm not a doctor. I couldn't do anything about that, but I could help Sam understand what was going to happen to TJ. And so I wrote it the week before TJ was born, thinking he would never come home from the hospital. And that's what plays out in the book, is that the mom is pregnant, my sister. When I tell you it looks just like my sister and my brother-in-law, my nephews, I'm like, y'all are very kind to let us draw pictures that look just like you. So my sister, my brother-in-law, as TJ is being born, the week before, we don't think he'll live. And so in the book, the baby dies in the hospital. And we were very clear in the book, TJ died. We need to use factual and actual, right, is what David Thomas says. And in fact, he wrote a letter in the back of the book for parents to help them as they're reading the book with kids. I just thought we need some expert stuff in here. I need you to tell them what to do after they read this, which was very generous of him to do that. So I write it, I print it out in Word and steal clip art from the internet and go to FedEx and print it out and laminate it and make a copy for my parents and a copy for my sister. And I thought that's what we were going to do with it. I thought it was going to be for Sam. And then as we started reading it to Sam, TJ ended up living 56 days, 3 weeks in the NICU, and then 5 weeks at Tatum and Jacob's house on hospice, 24/7 care. unbelievable. I mean, the trauma, it was unbelievable for our family, particularly for Tatum and Jacob and Sam, but they didn't leave their house hardly for 5 weeks, right? And people were with them constantly, doctors and nurses and family and friends. And a while after he died, Tatum started reading it to Sam. And then I sent it to my agent and I said, hey, this has helped us. I want to write the book that people call David and Sissy and say, how do I help my family? And they go, here it is. Where did TJ go? Go. Especially in the loss of another kid in the family. I said to my agent, will you just ask the publisher? This is such a niche book. I can't imagine. I just wasn't sure they'd say yes because they don't have to, right? Like they don't have to pick a book that is so niche and in who it'll serve. But they were like, you're right. This doesn't exist and we need it. The through line, Alison, is there is good news even in sad stories. And that's the gospel, right? There's good news even in sad stories. And parents need that and kids need that. And then what we've seen as we've announced it and made it public is, sadly, it is massively needed. I mean, 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage. And because TJ doesn't go home from the hospital in the book, it is a book that can be read to families who had miscarriage or stillbirth or had to make tough medical decisions or that the baby never came home. So we're thankful for who it's serving.
I love that you're putting your finger on that need. It is so common. It is so hard to know what to say. So many times people don't say something well-intended that isn't helpful. The book is there to kind of help reframe some of that and just give language. I know so many of my listeners have that need. How do you talk about it with kids?
While you're grieving.
We don't know, so we don't say anything.
How do you, as the mom or dad, you're barely surviving the grief of losing one of your children and you've got 3 others who need breakfast. Those parents, I don't know how they do it, but our hope is that Where Did TJ Go will be a tool that helps maybe a grandparent or an aunt or a friend partner with the parents, and the parents read it when they can. But you're right. It is this go-between that will hopefully help.
Well, it's naming something for kids because we know that kids suffer more when things go unspoken.
That's right. They know.
They know.
We know. You and I know the trauma that happened in our house when we were kids that's never been talked about. I mean, you feel it in your guts. So kids know.
I think it's a beautiful offering. Thanks for coming on and sharing about it with us.
Oh, of course.
Tell everybody, before I ask you my last 2 questions, I ask everybody, where can people find the book? Where can they find all things Annie Downs?
Yeah, so wheredidtjgo.com will help you. The book is everywhere you love to buy books. It comes out February 18th, so it's anywhere you love to buy books. There's something we're doing until people don't want me to do it anymore, where if you have lost a child in your family, we have these in loving memory of book plates where I'll sign your child's name because that's come up that's one of the most important things to families is that you say the name of the baby or the child that is with the Lord now. And so, I mean, in the first week, it was over 300 book plates I signed, Alison. I mean, unbelievable. So that's available at wheredidtjgo.com as well. And so that's where you can get all that. Annie F. Downs, embarrassingly, I'm everywhere. Anywhere you're looking for me, it's Annie F. Downs, and F is in fancy. So you can get to everything from anniefdowns.com, but Single Purpose League is there. That Sounds Fun podcast. I mean, all that you can find at anniefdowns.com.
We'll link to everything in the show notes. Annie, before we wind down, a couple questions I ask all my guests. What would you want 25-year-old Annie to know that you know now?
I get to answer this a lot because it's like a question that goes into Q&As a lot is what would you go back and say to yourself? Number 1, I always say, wear your retainers. Your parents already paid for your braces.
I knew you'd deliver something.
Nighttime for a lifetime. Nighttime for a lifetime. Because, spoiler alert, what happens is 40-year-old Annie had to pay for Invisalign because 25-year-old Annie quit wearing her retainers. So
I'm with you.
Wear your retainers. And then the other thing that I would go back and tell myself that we have talked about today without using this language is I say fall in love with your life. Whatever life God's given you today, fall in love with it. Because when you fall in love with the life that you have, then everything is bonus. Everything's bonus. And so every gift, every person, every relationship is like, well, I already loved what God had given. Now, the week after TJ died, was I in love with my life? Of course not. So I understand there's nuances to that sentence, but in general, can I figure out how to fall in love with the life God has given me right now so that I can see gifts when they show up? That's the goal.
I love that. Your energy is infectious. Annie, what's bringing out the best of you right now?
Oh, What is bringing out the best of me right now? Self-tanner is bringing out the best in me right now. I just feel different when I'm tan. And so that's really, in the middle of winter, that is a gift to feel like that mattered. I've had a really interesting couple of years with surgeries. I've not had surgery my whole life until the last 3 years, and I've had one a year the last 3 years. 2 of the 3 were repairing my knees. And so the other thing that's given me life right now is how much I'm enjoying getting my legs stronger so that my knees are stronger. And it is really fun to get stronger.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Just cannot have no surgery in 25. That's my motto. No surgery in 25. I mean, August of 22, August of 23, August of 24. Brutal. All
right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Everybody, check out the new book wherever books are sold. Thanks, Annie.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.